And recording is in progress. All right. So let me quickly introduce Mr. Vishwas Mandral. Mr. Vishwas Mandral is currently the head of container security and the chief architect of cloud at McAfee. And as we know, McAfee is the world's largest pure play security company. And what makes this particular session really interesting, and one of the biggest achievements of Vishwas is that he joined McAfee really through the acquisition of his company Nanosec, of which he was the founder and CEO. And the acquisition, I believe, if I'm right, happened just about a year ago. August 2019, somewhere in that time frame. So Vishwas was the founder and CEO of Nanosec, and I think in a span of 3 or 4 years, built the product, built the team, and had a very successful exit to McAfee. That's fantastic. And Vishwas has, previously he has also founded Ionos Networks. And LiveReach Media in the past. He'll be talking about his background context as well. And most importantly, he's a technologist. He's been in this space for 20 plus years. He has written more than 30 internet, the IETF RFCs and standards, mainly in the networking and security space. So with that, welcome Vishwas. We are really happy to have you. And please take it away, and look forward to a very engaging and interactive session.
Absolutely. I think, I'm looking forward to a very engaging interaction too. Thank you everybody for joining in on a Sunday morning. Good morning to all of you, and good morning, Rajiv. A special thank you to Rajiv for giving me the opportunity to talk to, H.A.C.K founders. I know you guys are actually going through the hoops. I really respect the founder. I respect the people. I respect you guys, right? You guys have done something phenomenal by actually taking the leap, trying to build something on your own, being able to sort of, believing in yourself and actually taking the leap and moving forward. I think that itself is a big challenge. I've been through the hoop a few times, so I really respect founders, the people who've actually taken the risk and gone ahead. So kudos to you. I know it's a Sunday morning, and I know this is I'm assuming this is your dream Sunday morning, right? The day after a big holiday, which was Independence Day yesterday. Now you get to talk to a founder who just got lucky in a way, and he's now sort of preaching, how awesome he is, or how he was able to do things as if he knows everything. And I don't want that to be I don't want you to feel that way. I just want to tell you that, hey, I have had a journey. I don't know whether that's the right journey or the wrong journey. The key thing that I'm going to try to do as part of this discussion is, of course, keep it very interactive and open. But then I also want to make sure that I give you not just what I learned or what I thought was the right path, right, or the path I took. I also want to tell you the wrong paths that I've taken in the past, or because I advise a lot of companies. It's also about the paths that these other companies have taken in the past and have actually not done as well because of this, because of the decisions they have taken. So I'm hopeful that it is useful to you guys, because it's you guys are in the space. I would love to sort of help you in any which way you can. So that's sort of me, right? So before I go any further, and we can go into, I have a few slides, but we can always keep it interactive. Let me just give you a brief idea of my journey, right? So I'm a technologist at heart, like Rajiv said, 30 RFC standards. I was a heads down coder. I did my bachelor's in computer science and engineering from REC Trichy. I joined, H.A.C.K. I was there, doing network, then did some network security. I've done, from there, I went to a company called Cynet, where I did some chip architecture. And this is where I first actually got into, a lot of IPsec and so on, right? A lot of the VPN technologies. I actually I'm the author of some of the IPsec standards. If you see out there, if you search for IPsec and Vishwas Mandral, you might find a few standards that I have written, right? From there, I went on to, from Cynet, and I went to NetPlane, Cynet. I went on to a lot of network security company. I did a lot of DRM on the consumer side. I did, things like DLNA and DTCP IP, basically making sure, that when people buy content from providers like Sony and others, they're not sharing the content, or if they're sharing, the others cannot use it, and all those interesting things that were big in I think 2005 2006 time frame. That's what I was doing. From there I actually started I worked for HP for some time, right? A big company called HP. And I was there for about 2.5 years. I was the distinguished technologist, the chief technologist there, leading over a $250 million product line, right? But again, being a technologist at heart, I did not, while I was strategist and, sort of chief technologist doing all the sort of giving gyan to people, I realized, that's not what I want to do. I want to get into more like, hands. That's where I started this company called Ionus Networks. The company still runs. I think we had I don't know where it is. 4 years back, we had an office in on what's it? Forget Indranagar. Is it or somewhere? Yeah, somewhere in Bangalore. Of course, in the Valley too. And now that company spun off into two companies called Ionus Networks and LiveReach Media. They're into ads and analytics. They're into IoT and so on, right? And while I was there in Ionus Networks and others only for a year and a half, I actually thought I wanted to do something back into my core technology that I had worked on, that was cybersecurity or security. And that's when I went ahead and did Nanosec. Right? Nanosec is the company that Rajiv mentioned. I founded about 5 years back, sold it about a year back to McAfee, and I and went through the hoops, I guess, and that's the journey we'll talk about. So that's in brief of my journey. Mainly a technologist at heart, have been a deep down coder. Went on to become chief, like CTO kind of role. Went on to do some, become a founder, and then finally came into Nanosec, which finally got acquired. And I have a lot of marks to show. I do not know how much. Whether I took the best path or not, but like I said, I have a lot of marks to show of the failures or the challenges that I've had, and I would be willing to share it with you guys. So before I go forward, I would love to hear from you guys. Right, what were you expecting to hear from me? Because I know Nanda just mentioned, right, she's trying to do B2B, she was trying to see earlier, and that didn't work. I know Chetak mentioned SMBs, right, selling to so small home office markets, right? Where do all of you see this? What are you trying to expecting to gain from this? What do you want me to sort of focus on? I want to make sure that this, because you're getting up early morning and doing all these things. I want to make sure that it's worth your time. Go ahead.
Hello, this is Nanda again. Yeah. So Vishwas, thank you for giving this session, and I'm actually looking forward to hear more about your experience. But the important point as an early stage startup, I would like to know what mistakes we should avoid, and basically learn from your experience. Like what is your key tips that you would like to give us as an early stage startup? And what are the basic business mistakes that we should avoid? So that's what I'm looking forward to.
Absolutely. I can give you that without. Yeah, I have made so many mistakes. I don't know how much I can tell you, but I'll try to summarize them into a few that I can, and that would be palatable to you guys. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Hi Vishwas, this is Chetak here. I was just about to ask the same to share your areas of failure as well while building this particular entire product and during the entire career in cybersecurity. As an entrepreneur, I'm sure even in those you will find some lessons not to do that.
Absolutely. I think that's what I think I should focus my talk on. In fact, that was actually my thought on the whole thing. Saying, like, and this leads to my next slide. If you look at the next slide, that's exactly where it is, right? Victory has 1,000 fathers, but defeat is an orphan, right? But if I talk on my journey, right, instead of talking of it from a perspective of just success, right, or where the one path I took, I think I want to make sure that I focus on the lessons, right? The not the one path that I took, but if I tell you what I did, I can certainly, it may not even apply to you. I'll give you examples, right? When I was trying to do the exit and I had some offers, I talked to multiple CEOs, startup CEOs who had exits. And I'll tell you, right, interestingly, everybody had totally diagonally opposite views. One said, take this offer, this is good, because last time, my company was about to be bought by Google and I didn't take it, and then I didn't get an offer. Well, the other guy was like, you know what, I didn't take it last time, and it was better, and in the longer run it helped. So the views are going to be totally opposite. The thing that you have to look at is, right, when I'm giving you my views, is based on my perspective, my thoughts, my views, my aims, my desires. It may not necessarily apply to you, but what I can do, because I'm focusing on the failures, I'm sure some of the failures that I'll be sharing will be, of course, my own, but because I also advise a lot of companies, I'll also make sure that the failures that I talk about are also of the companies that I'm advising, right, or what I hear a lot from entrepreneurs or people who are about to start or people who've started, right, what are they doing wrong? And that's what I will certainly share, Chetak. So absolutely. Anything else? Maybe the others?
That makes a lot of sense for us to being in the same sector. It makes a lot of sense for us as well. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I see others.
And Greg,
go ahead.
Yeah. Yes, I think it'll be great if others can chime in as well. But I think overall, what what we want to focus and what we've been focusing some of the previous sessions with the cybersecurity startup founders have generally revolved around starting from the origin, right? So why you started. I think that's all. I mean, the reasons might be different for different people, but what would you and focusing on what would you have done differently if you were to start out again? In terms of picking the problem to solve, the bootstrapping versus going for angel funding, raising money, hiring. How would you hire about differently? I think Nanda and others had similar questions on hiring for early stage startups. Do you tap experienced talent with that come with a much higher price tag that's harder to afford versus we heard from Rajesh of Security Share about how his belief is to take really fresh grads, people who are really hungry and who are affordable for an early stage startup, and really groom them through the life cycle of the startup. So that part, and how do you go about market validation? Some of the things Chetak and others are asking. How do you go about building the POC? Do you first validate? Do you do the POC, chicken and egg? How do you solve that? How do you go about traction? What are the learnings? How did you pivot? And people, again, there's no right answer, right? You stick to your beliefs and your initial gut feelings, even though your initial market validation says no, or do you pivot immediately depending on what your customer says? Do you focus on each and every customer? Or these are not even customers, right? They're prospects, potential customers who are today not even willing to trial your POC for free. Then how do you take that to a first paying customer? How do you deal with competition, which I think is critical for all the early stage startups, which I'm sure you have a lot of insight about. Then and finally sort of going towards the acquisition, right? That is really sort of the end of the tunnel from a success perspective, or potentially even, if you have learnings to share about, how did, when do you say, no, this is it, right? If you're going to stop this, it could be a POC, a project, an idea, or it could be the company itself saying, okay, this is not working, your initial idea was wrong, so we are going to start out again. How do you make that call, which is probably the hardest that most startup founders will go through, right? Keeps dragging it, stretching it, and trying to sort of be the long tail, or do you want to take a big shot? And again, it depends on your ambition, right? Are you trying to build this as a potentially VC funded, $1 billion, $10 billion startup, for which the path I think is very different in terms of growth and other things? Or are you fashioning this as, okay, this is something, it's a family business, I believe in certain principles, there are certain gaps, but I'm willing to spend the next 10 years on this, right? So I think all those aspects will be great if you can touch upon and give your perspectives.
You asked me so many questions. I don't know whether I remember all of them. I did try. I have a pen in my hand. I'm trying to take down notes, but I wasn't able to capture all of that. But I will try to cover as many as possible. Please feel free to ask me questions as I sort of talk about it. But the key thing I see it this, right? Why did you start? Or you ask me, right? Hey, maybe that's the sort of the why did you start, or how did you sort of get the idea, or so on, right? So the inception, right? I think it's the same, right? When does somebody leave a company, or when does somebody want to do something else, right? Just like that, there are two or three things. Firstly, you see a destination, right? You see something that, hey, I see a destination that looks brighter than where I am. where I'm staying is good, but this other place looks better. But you don't just leave just because you see, hey, there's a better place. You leave when you see you are dissatisfied with the current state, and you also see a path for yourself getting from where you are to what the destination that you think you want to get to, and you see there is a path for you to get there, right? And that's how I see it. Whether it's leaving a company, starting a company, it's always that way, right? Again, people have the driver could be money, right? Hey, I want to make $1 billion, and I see, there are companies that have made billion, and I know, while working in a company, I may not be making anywhere close to that. So that would be a reason. It could be, hey, I believe in this technology, and I really believe, I am the one that can execute it and get it to fruition, and so I have to create something. So the motives for people could be different, but for me, the motive was very simple, right? I had written a lot of technology. In fact, I'll tell you, right? I was in India till not too long back, till 11 years back. I was actually in India, and or maybe more now, 12, 13 years back, right? I was in India. I was working out of Bangalore, again, interestingly, for companies in the US, right? So a lot of CTOs and founders knew, because the RFCs and standards that I had written, they wanted me to sort of work for them. And so I was like, okay, I was in a good state. I was just working out of India, getting salary in US dollars. Couldn't beat that, right? And I used to live in Vasant Nagar in close to what is that? I forget now. Mount Carmel College, and it was an easy life, right? And that's what I was doing, right? But the thing that I saw was, right, when I was working from India, I had some ideas, I had some thoughts, and when I went to VCs in India, right, I went to Sequoia, I went to a lot of others, I got a lot of pushback saying, hey, yes, this is good, but tell me the BOM cost, or tell me this, and I would see on the other side my friends in the US who were there, they would actually be getting funding on the similar line. And that's when I sort of decided to sort of say, okay, you know what? At that time, at least in India, there was not so much funding happening. People, were actually into funding, already established businesses, not necessarily startups. The startup momentum was not that much, and that's when I said, okay, you know what? All my friends are there. People are calling me there. I'm not, I'm staying in Bangalore, and it's not necessarily working out for me. And that's when I sort of left, right? When I came to the US, I sort of worked. I figured out what are the gaps, having been in India versus here. And one of the key gaps that I found, right, India, we've got great technologists, people who know the ins and outs of technology. They know things really well. They can create new ideas, right? Hey, this is where the technology is probably a better way to do, endpoint security is this, or a better way for consumer security is this way, or a better way to do, EDR is this way, or whatever else, right? Better way to do vulnerability management is this way. But the key thing that we miss out is the customer input and feedback. And that's one thing I focused on right from the beginning. In fact, the way I started this company was exactly like this, right? So I was very dissatisfied with, like I said, I was in this big company, a chief technologist, talking to a lot of customers, but, because I did not have much power in a big company, you own a lot of budget, but, because it's a big ship, it's very hard for one person to steer the ship one direction or another, or change the direction of the ship. And what that led to for me was, this is not what I want to do, and I want to be starting something that is more important. And because I had seen all my others that I was working with actually having great customer contact, I actually started off not with an idea. Actually started off saying, okay, of course, understanding the trends in the market, what is happening in the market, what was changing, what would the market look like 10 years from now, but also very closely working with customers. And I worked with a lot of customers. And to tell you the truth, right, the way I did it is I got some idea. I looked at, okay, so from my perspective, when I was looking at containers, I was seeing some things, right? The market is changing a lot. What we are seeing was applications, and bringing new applications to the market is becoming more and more critical for companies, and bringing that application faster and faster. And what we were also seeing on the other side was, as new values getting added into applications, lots of new applications coming online, we are seeing the threats and adversaries becoming more sophisticated. And then we are seeing the third trend, which was that end-to-end encryption was growing. And so what we said, okay, you know what? Let's try to. We have this idea. On one side there are all these people are trying to develop applications faster and faster, right? There's this cloud thing happening that we all know about. The other side, adversaries are becoming more sophisticated, and there's end-to-end encryption. What does that mean to a company? So let's extrapolate 10 years hence. What happens? Assume everything is end-to-end encrypted. What happens? What does it mean? Right? That's how I extrapolated. And assumed, okay, I said, okay, assume 10 years hence, all applications are being built and changed at a very, very fast pace. And this was 5 years back, right? When that was not true. Now if I say that, it looks like, hey, that was all that everybody knows. That's exactly how things are. But at that time, it didn't seem as obvious to people. And when I extrapolated that, I said, okay, you know what? The current model of network security or security that resides, either through appliances or in the cloud that acts as man in the middle is not going to work. It's certainly not going to work because you know what? There's end-to-end encryption. You have to break the encryption to look at data. The other part of it is the context is missing with application changing and things being so dynamic. Having a static model of security is not going to work for sure. Again, this is going to happen 10 years in, not next year. So what do I do? So what I did is first we understood the whole picture saying, okay, right now this is where we are. These are the trends. Extrapolated, let's think where the world is going to be in 10 years. Then come back, right? Interpolate it. So come backwards and say, where does the world look like right now, right? Or which were the companies that are going to be affected first, right? So we've seen the trend. It goes in 10 years, things are going to be there, but which are the companies that are going to be affected first in this space, right? Which are the companies that we know are the first adopters in this space, right? That are willing to pay for security technology, and what are the key pain points that they're going to have. So we understand their business, understand their problems. And so what I did was I worked with a lot of companies out of New York. I worked with companies, some of the biggest companies out of the Bay Area too, right? Saying and the way to get through, and and I can tell you how to get them, but there are lots of ways to get through. But I made sure I was able to get through to them and got my ideas iterated with them, saying, okay, you know what? This is my idea. This is what I think. This is where we are. This is where I think your pain point is going to be. Do you agree with that? And people said, yes, I agree with the problem. But and once we got the problem, everybody agreed with the problem. I said, okay, that's good. Now let me try to iterate the solution. I did not start the company yet. I just went ahead and said, okay, you know what? Let me iterate the solution, right? So I created a first idea of what the architecture looks like. The good thing was I was a technologist myself, and I had like I said, been talking to customers a lot. I said, okay, you know what? Let me iterate the solution. Would this created the first level solution saying, hey, would this work for you? And they would say, no, this doesn't work because A, B, and C. You want everything automatic. That's not going to work in an enterprise. People don't adopt things like that. This is not how things will work. Okay, got some feedback. Okay, sorry, thank you. Kept on iterating it till I got at least 3 or 4 people who said, you know what? If you made what you are telling me, I would be willing to buy this solution. And what I did when I got that, that's when I said, okay, you know what? I have found what I'm looking for. I've found, the problem, and at least the first idea of the problem and the first idea of the solution. And now I can go ahead and start a company. And that's when I went ahead. I was already in a company called Ionus Networks. I left that and I said, which I was the founder and CTO of, and I went ahead and started Nanosec, which is the company that I'm going to talk more about. And I went out and went ahead and started the company. That was sort of how the idea came about. Any questions on the whole background, at least how I sort of came to the idea, or what the idea was, or how I sort of thought of it and why I did it? So I think that's what we covered till now.
Hey Vishwas, this is Prakash here. That's awesome. So just a quick question, from the market validation perspective, it's awesome to get a few customers involved at the idea stage itself, to tell you, what they're looking for, or to tell you, whether your approach is right or wrong, etc. But in companies, especially in India, who don't have that reach outside of India, how do you get that market validation done? Because the customers here tend to be more like, you build it, bring it to me, and then I will see if I need it or not. Or, when you bring it, I will tell you what else is missing. So it's more of a chicken or egg situation, especially for security companies that are headquartered, say, in India.
So the way I look at it, that's correct, right? And you're absolutely right. And the way you look at it, right, is exactly also the case in the US. Of course, less so here. There are a lot of people who do not understand that, right? the way to look at it is this. So the way I look at it is, who do I target, right? So if I was you, right, sitting in your place, right, and saying, okay, you know what, I have this company, I have this idea, I want to do something. The way I would look at it is this, okay, who are the people, if I'm selling for the India market, who are the companies that have actually bought from startups in the past? What is the previous generation of product, if there was, right? Again, in India, that's this such a nascent market, may not have. What are the previous generation of similar, maybe same product or similar product that companies bought, right? So if Reliance bought from startups in the past, right, and hey, this was a company in a similar space, may not be security, may monitoring, maybe something else, something in a similar infrastructure space, that where their solutions were bought and the early customers, they were willing to be customers. Reach out to those guys. Those are the guys who would be willing. If you're just going to go randomly to people and say, hey, help me, firstly, you will get very old advice. People may not be the right people to understand. They may not be at the cutting edge of technology or cutting edge of people. They may not be the right people to actually buy your solution. The way I look at it is, if I was to look at it from your perspective, saying, okay, how do I figure out who the right customers are to talk to? That's how I would do it. Either look at the previous generation of the same product, see who so if, as an example from my case, right, if it was company X, that was the previous generation of my same product, I would see, okay, that was a startup that did very well. I would say, okay, which were the companies that actually took the solution maybe 5 years back, but which are the companies that took the solution? Who are the people? Because in a lot of cases, how you find out is very easy. People have press releases. They're saying, you know what, this is our first customer, or this is a big customer. Find those people who have actually ready to work with startups, and who ready to be partners with companies like yours, and take it from there. That's how I would say. The second way I look at it is, right, this, which is where I see App Dynamics and other companies. In fact, this guy Jyoti Bansal brought this up, I think, in one of his talks. He said he did not do validation based on just this, right? The way he did validation was, he actually went to LinkedIn, right? Once one was the idea, right? The second part of it is finding what profile of user also, right? And that is the problem that I had. And I'll give you this, right? Because I was a chief technologist at HP and gone through a technology ladder, I actually talked to CTOs. And because I was not a seller, I was not into sales as much, I did not bother to ask the actual owners of the budgets, right? And so when I took this idea to, I'll give you an example, right? When I took this idea to lots of big VCs, they said, hey, we like it, we love it, what you're saying, we'd love to invest in you. But then that day goes, you know what? The people you are bringing on as reference have not been the people who have the budgets. They are the people who just talk technology, but they're not the ones who have the budget. And so if I was to do it now, the way I would look at it is, okay, find the people in these companies that have the budget, find the companies first, like I said. And the way to look at companies would be, like I gave you one example of it, I'm sure there are a lot other examples, right, to look at it. You find the people in these companies who are the buyers, talk to those buyers. And my take is this, right, while in India people are more conservative, like you said, essentially VCs and everybody, I'll say it this way, they're essentially greedy, right? Finally, if you show them the money, show them, hey, this is the path to money. And if they feel they are going to miss out on a big opportunity, and if they feel, based on the opportunity that, somebody else might be funding you, they're going to go out of the way to fund you. That's how I see it. It's, I've seen very good ideas that do not get funded, and I've seen pretty bad ideas that get funded, and it's a lot to do with these things versus the idea itself. Does it make sense, Prakash? Or would it make
Thank
sense?
you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I had a follow-up question.
Yeah, go
ahead.
Similar subject. This is Chetan here.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so you said, it was a spur of a moment kind of decision, right? So you just quit and started. So was that all? Or you also spoke to some of the CTOs or some of the decision makers, and you found that, this has got legs, your idea has got legs. Was that it?
Yeah.
Or did you do some more market validation? Did you have a plan to start your startup, and how did it look like? Did you look, 6 months ahead, 1 year ahead? Did you look at funding? So what all things went through?
Yeah, that's a good point, Chetan. So yes, absolutely, I did market validation. Like I said, right, before I started off, I looked at the idea. I said, okay, I iterate the idea, actually extrapolate, the trends in the market, and see how the security, in enterprise gets affected. So I looked at 2 or 3 trends. Like I said, end-to-end encryption as a trend. I looked at the fact that containers and all these dynamic infrastructures were coming in, and then I looked at the whole sophisticated hackers, and I said, you know what, the first thing that, and I'll tell you where I started the idea. The first thing that I got was, I worked with Bloomberg, and Bloomberg guys said, you know what, I have switch walls. Switch walls are basically, they're doing firewalls on switches. They call them switch walls, and their take was, as you're getting to these more dynamic architectures, my switch walls, right, the number of ACL rules that I have on a switch is getting limited. I'm not able to do firewalls and switches, and I want to be able to segment my applications and networks in a way that there were others, there are other companies that gave me similar idea, but their take was, I want to be able to segment my infrastructure in a way where where I could move applications around in these dynamic environments, be able to work across end-to-end encrypted environments, and be able to help minimize the risk. All this I did not after starting the company. All this I did before starting the company, right? And only once they told me they were willing to buy the solution that I thought, and when I said solution, it's not just the idea of the problem, it was also the idea of the solution. I actually went ahead and said, this is the architecture, this is what I'm going to build, this is the prototype of it, and prototype meaning just wireframes of the UI, saying this is what it's going to look like, and some idea of what the things on the machines would look like. But once we did that, only after that we went out and actually started the company. That's how I look at it. So it was not Chetan, it wasn't that it wasn't a spur of the moment decision. It was actually a well thought out long-term decision. At least that's how I see it.
Thank you. And what was the planning from then on? 6 months plan,
so
1 year plan?
So plan was also very simple, right? So interestingly, there's a company called Viptela, right? And I'll give you multiple companies that I was supposedly on the founding team of. Viptela got sold for $610 million, right? There was another company, I think, another few companies that I was supposed to be part of, that I worked with the founders before they started off, right? The 2 founders, the 3 founders, and I'm working with them before they started off. And then when the final time came, I didn't feel as comfortable to start off and take that journey. But what I saw was how they were successful. And like I said, the ideas of success were all dependent on customers, right? So I saw, so one of the companies got funded by Sequoia, right? And they got funding based on a few CIOs, right? Big CIOs who went ahead and said, you know what? The idea that these guys have given me is really good. I like the thing, and this is going to be a big problem for me in the next 2-3 years. And I'm willing to buy this solution. Again, there's no written letter, but they were willing to talk on behalf of the company externally, right? So it's being referenced. I did the same thing. I got, maybe 5 or 6 references from various different companies, some, but also some, SVPs, EVPs who were willing to talk. And in fact, I did have multiple, I would say, I did have a couple of term sheets, right? Or at least near term sheets that we had where people said, this is the term, this is what you need to do, and go forward.
Thank you.
Yep. So interestingly, right, and I'll give you this thing. So we did have term sheets from some of the, we did have term sheets from, and we did have an intent to participate in a round from some of the biggest VCs. But interestingly, right, because and I can see it now, right, being a technology, I can see it now, having gone through the loop. People said, hey, you know what, you need to get a founder, right, a co-founder with you who's from the business, because you seem to be a very technology focused guy, and you need to have business. I need to get you a business background, and if you get that person, we are ready to sort of fund you now. The thing that I had was, I had the same experience in my previous company, that was IONS Network, which I had started. I got funding on day 1. Before the day I left a big company, I got funding on day 1. But the problem for me was this, right? Once I got in, we had a different set of we had some management structures that I was very comfortable with, right? And then the direction was also not very comfortable with, because I took money on day 1, and I didn't want the same thing to be repeated in the Nanosec, which was the next company I was starting, and that's why I finally did not take the funding route the second time around. The first time around, when I started my company, I did take the funding. I thought it was not the right time to take the funding. The second time around, I did not take the funding. Again, interesting thing, right? Like I think Rajiv mentioned it. I think there are 2 paths, and this is my learning now, right? I think there are 2 exact paths for startups, right? One is a hyper growth path. You get on the treadmill, you have to deliver, right? Spend money is not the issue. It's about, growth. And that's one path of the thing. You cannot expect to become a multi-billion-dollar company without going on that path. The second path is, okay, I'm going to do it myself. Figure out, yes, it's going to be a lot of learning, but it's going to be a long haul process and it's going to be more painful, but the learning is going to be immense. And if you are lasting in that state in the long run, you're going to have the benefits are going to be also immense. You see Zscaler, I saw, right? The only round of funding they took, right? Zscaler now I think is valued at 16 billion or something. I was seeing yesterday or day before. The first round of funding they took was $100 million. That's where they started the first round. Before that, for 6-7 years or whatever, they actually built it all by themselves. It took them a long time to get to maybe $1 billion or whatever, but compared to other companies. But once they got there, they were in total control. The CEO is still in control. All the management is in control, and it's everything is intact. So I think that's the way I look at it. If you want to go on a $1 billion thing, if your aims are to sort of make a lot of money and either big get lot or zero, go funding, take the money, plan according to VCs, get things going and move forward. If not, then you have to do the long haul way, which is what I did, right? After going ahead and doing this long haul way is, okay, put in your own money, get things going, bootstrap, and see how you can drive the product, get it to a level where it's you're selling it to customers and take it from there. So that's the second part that I finally took. That's how I see it. So that's the thing of the ideas, right? So the key thing I would say, I think, just to summarize, I think the key thing has to be, idea has to be sort of differentiated a bit. It has to be aspirational. It has to be bold. That's where the ideas are. We have to think for the longer run, right? It's all about longer run. But even though we think of the longer run, we have to sort of, take smaller steps, right? It's about that's how I see it. You have to think of the longer run, but you have to take the sort of, like I said, look at it what the market will be 10 years hence, but then iterate it down, saying, okay, only these 2 verticals and these 3 companies are the ones that I'm going to target, or these 100 companies are the ones that I'm going to target and get to the next level of funding. Makes sense? And when you're taking something, right, or whenever you're planning something, right, even if you are doing this, right, what is going to be a first step? You have to be very clear, right? If your first step is going to be in 2 years, I want to do Series A, you have to understand the metrics of Series A to take this step, right? Because, hey, you're taking a step, you need to know that in Series A, these are the metrics, right? Maybe, it's $100,000 ARR. I don't know what the metrics are in India right now, right? Or $500,000 ARR and, a growth rate of X%, CAGR of this, whatever, right? Whatever metrics they are, you need to know those metrics, be able to identify those metrics, and be able to sort of plan for those metrics, because at some point in time, you're going to take that funding. If the second step for you is not funding, if the second step for you is just, either taking it to IPO or, taking it, selling it, you have to accordingly plan. That's my idea. And to me, right, it's not about the plans, it's about the planning. And this is what I think I have this quote, right, because what happens is that things change. You think it's going to be like this, but you think you're going to take VC funding, which is what I thought. But as you move forward, you realize, VC funding, if I take, it's going to be a painful journey, and I don't want to go through that journey. So you have to change it. But it's not about the plan itself, it's about the planning. Because once you planned it, I'm taking VC funding because of this, and this is what it'll take me, and this is what the product will be, or this is what the path of the product will be. If you've sort of planned it, you've thought about everything. Once you get another a hiccup or a sort of a roadblock in the journey, you're going to be looking at saying, okay, you know what, I understand the problems, and what I'm going to now do is okay, there's this new hiccup that has come in the journey, and what I'm going to do now is, it's very easy for me to change the path because I already know where I went wrong, right? That's how I see it. So that's where I look at the strategy, right? So the focus has to be very, very narrow in you, right? When you have to start the product, the MVP, right? You have to be very, very narrow focused. You cannot be like, oh, yes, I'm a security company or I'm a vulnerability management company. I can do vulnerability for everything and every software and every vertical and everything. While that may be true, that may be the vision of where you want to head to, you have to narrow it down, saying, you know what? These are the set of verticals that are going to be affected first. It's going to be financial vertical, or in India, okay, the call centers are going to be affected. Only the Uber drivers are the ones who are going to be affected first. And I'm going to target those Uber drivers. Drivers are a uniform way that I can target them, right? I can market to them easily. I can have the sales people who are selling other products to Uber drivers and so on. So you have to sort of narrow down not just the focus of your product, but also the market, right? And the verticals. And you have to sharpen that pencil to a level when you get to where you say, you know what, I understand with the limited resources that I have, I can build this thing and get to and build the product to get to these customers and get some revenues to help me get to the next stage that I want to get to. Does it make sense, Prakash? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Vishwas, I just wanted to, I think it's a fantastic set of feedback, but I wanted to sort of double down the focus on two critical things that you have brought up, right? And these are not new things, but I think these are very, very critical. Sometimes they're the elephant in the room. One is the concept of market validation, right? So it is, you've stressed it enough that, okay, build it and they will come is not a mentality that works. In general, there might be some brilliant, media articles that we read that, somebody had a vision, they built it, and it became a huge success. But then more often than not, it's really about iterations, right? So market validation is critical. I think that's fantastic. But I think the elephant in the room for many of, I would say all the Indian startups, right, that are not focused on a consumer market. So it's not the Swiggy's and the Olas and other things that are focused on the huge, 1.3 billion Indian consumer market. It's really this, the enterprise security market. If you're looking at that, and security is all about enterprise, like Nanda and we had this discussion earlier. So in that case, we know that the market is in the West today. Right, it's always been, and when I say West, it is really the US and Europe, which are the biggest consumers and even the producers of some of the cutting edge technologies in this space. And security, I think, also happens to be a case where you cannot have a stale product. You can't be you can have a Me Too kind of a product. I also do this and come in at a lower price point, but typically there are no borders for this technology, right? So even for enterprises sitting in India that are your prospects, they can, with a click of a button, and if they have a check, they can get a Zscaler, a McAfee, a Symantec, or a CrowdStrike, or whoever they want. And there is no real need today for them to go to an Indian player unless they have better technology or a lower price point or any other policy related aspects, right? So the question is, for the startups here, they know that the Indian market is not an early adopter market. Willingness to pay is definitely not there as much as the Western market and all the other things that you discussed. So the controversial point is, okay, what do you think about the Indian startups trying to focus on the US market or the Western market to start off with, and not spend time trying to do free POCs and other things and trying to appease the Indian market? So that is one.
So from my perspective, this is what I see, right? We have to solve a pain point, not, it has to be like they say, it's a painkiller, not a vitamin, right? So my take is we have to solve a pain point and not, something that is really burning for them. My take is, I agree, in India, things are considerably more tight. It's a lot harder to get money from people, but there is also this aspect that you have to see, right? Because you are in India, you're going to be able to get or create things that the Indian consumer or Indian enterprises need that may not necessarily be applicable to everywhere else. An example could be, I don't know what the privacy policy in India is. If there's a privacy policy and you have auditors for privacy as an example, right? Hey, having that can create value for you, that's what you should look at. That's the way I look at it. See, there has to be some, from my perspective, right? Everybody has an advantage, right? Being in India, there are advantages, there are disadvantages. Being here, there are advantages, but there are also big disadvantages in the valley. Very hard to get talent. Everybody wants to be a CEO here. Nobody wants to be working, right? Everybody wants to be CEO. So there are lots of advantages and disadvantages everywhere. We have to sort of take care of the advantages and discount the disadvantages. From my perspective, you're right? If you are trying to sell to companies in the US, you have to know know the market as well, and customers could be doing things just as customers, I would say companies would be willing to do anything for these customers, right? And big companies are going to be there. There are going to be startups here. You have to see why your solution makes more value, why you think what you're doing is different or unique, right? Like I said, idea has to be different, it has to be differentiated, it has to be aspirational, it has to be sort of something more should I say loud, right? It has to be something on those lines. That's how I see it. So from my perspective, yes, it's going to be a challenge, but I do not. So so this is the way I look at it. Yes, there are going to be challenges in India because you're going to have your customers who are not necessarily going to buy your products if you're trying to sell it as easily. But my take is, because you have these customers and if you know them better than anybody else, maybe the path is hey, you do services first, help them build it, and then maybe that's the path to building a product. I don't know every company. I'll give you examples of some companies that I know, not in the consumer, not in the consumer space, in the enterprise space, but not in the security space. Then the sales and marketing space. In fact, I talked to their CEO I think 3 days back. He has an offer. Their company is 2 years old. He's selling to enterprises in India, and he's already has an offer for an acquisition. He called me more to see, hey, should I, I'm getting into Series A kind of money and Series A kind of thing, and what do I do? But it was, the guy actually worked while he got his team going. Even before, while he was still working in a company, he got his team sort of running and going even before he himself left the company. They did some services and iterations before they actually got everything going. But it was into sales and marketing side of things, but in SaaS, right, in the SaaS space. And they got customers in India as well as in the US, and they were able to do it pretty well even from India. And like I said, he already has an offer in 2.5 years, which is pretty good. Again, it's from a self-funded large company with like hundreds of millions of ARR revenue. But yeah, that's where it is. So I don't think it is impossible. I think it is hard. That's what I would say. And there has to be a differentiation. If you're going to say the market is hard, and the fact that things cannot be sort of the market is hard and customers not buying it, you have to look at it from the other side, saying yes, the opportunity in this case is even bigger, because for coming to the space, it's going to be harder. And the way you have to look at it is, what can you be doing for these customers that they need now, that is not provided by other companies? And an example I give you, maybe there's some privacy protection act by India, maybe other companies don't do it, right, because they're global companies. Can you be the first one to help them make that, right? I know companies that have got big funding here in the US, based on particular privacy standard that have come out newly, and they've got raised huge amounts of money based on that, saying, okay, this is how we are going to start off. That's not what our destination is. That's our foot in the door, and that's where we'll sort of expand from. I don't know, Rajiv, if I answered your question, but that's my sort of.
No, you did. I think, there are many aspects to it, right? I think the best, the people who are going through this journey are the startups that are here. So it'll be interesting to hear from them. Make in India for the world is something that is getting, that's being talked about a lot, right? So building in India, building from India and in India definitely has huge advantages, talent, pricing, all those things. But my question was more about the market, right? The initial early adoption market. And unless you have a huge differentiator compared to the big guys, the incumbents, right, it's going to be very tough. And yes, if there are, a lot of the enterprise security is really driven based on compliance. So if there are compliance aspects here in India that that you can leverage, that you are the first player, you understand it, you obviously have a head start. You see, when it is going to be not just announced but enforced, and you can actually leverage that, work with banks, fintech, and others who are really liable to follow such regulations. Then I think it's fantastic. I know that Prakash and others are Prakash Security Share and others are looking at this aspect, and would be interesting to hear from hear from them, right? So I do see that Chaitanya from Project, even Chetan synchronized, Chetak, others. How do you see this as a problem? Market validation, the focus of this. Do you see that there is Do you see similar ideas in the Valley that are getting the funding and the traction, but you feel like, hey, you're building here, you don't have a base, you don't have a business sales guy in the Valley, and would that be something that would be interesting? What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think very good question there, Rajiv. That is exactly the spot where we are in. I think whatever Vishwas is telling is, while it is a good story, it doesn't resonate so well with us because it's a very different environment that we are in over here, right? While I think most of us in this session are building a product-based startup, the challenges are definitely there, wherein whatever was outlined earlier, right? The customers are not so much liking to adopt, early stage startup products, right? They look towards, probably West or elsewhere for this validation, and then they start buying products. If you are successful there, then probably they'll buy a product over here, which is problem, but that's the way it is. And also what we see is that, probably the North American market is a better fit. They're more mature. And even when we speak, but there is actually a problem of, how can we get into the market? How do you get into the market itself is a big question sitting from here.
Correct.
So these
Absolutely.
are
And it's
things
not just about the market, it's also about differentiation, how well you know the market, right? It's like the solution can be good only when you know the market well. It's like, so that's it. So if I get you correctly, do you know of, so let's try to solve it right now. I know we cannot do it, but let's sort of just take a thought experiment there. Do you see any enterprise companies that have been successful in India, startups, or have you not? I see a lot of them, right? Zoho and so
of
many
course.
others.
Yes,
How have they done it? Do you see the path that they've taken? Because they've taken a path. They've got companies. There are precedents, right? It's not like you're going to be the first companies that are going to take this path. There have been companies that have sold to enterprises and done very well. So what did they do? Did they have customers in India or did they have in the US? Have you seen where they are, or what's the path?
Yeah. So we look at all these kind of companies, right? Especially these companies, they grew organically and then they reached out to the other markets and so on, right? While we also see that if you see the areas where you want to go and make a difference, the bleeding edge kind of technologies, then you have less time. So you don't have 8 years, 10 years horizon to grow and then start saying that I'll go to some other market, because you have a product which is probably better, faster, cheaper, and so on, right? We are competing in a different space where we're saying that we're getting into new technology areas. So there, you want to go to the market and capture it probably quickly because you are a pioneer in the market. If you say I want to grow organically and so on, then probably you're biding your time and you may be already late to the market. What we
But then
need
I
is,
see another side of it, right? Maybe sorry to interrupt you there.
Yeah.
So then thing is you want to do a, so then you're not bought into the idea of being making sure that the problem you're solving is critical. What you are saying is you want to work on the latest and the greatest technology and get things going. See, there are inherent advantage. You yourself mentioned India is a very cost sensitive place, right? If you can get a product that provides similar functionality at 1/10 the price, would people buy it? It's never about the technology. If you're trying to say that I want to work in a technology and get going, probably not. Maybe I'm misunderstanding it, right?
No, there is definitely a market, right? We have done a market validation. We have a couple of customers even in India, so we feel that if we are able to sell it in India, then probably it has got its legs, and we should be able to sell it outside as well. And we see that there is interest being shown, but it is not the same as selling to a customer in the US. So how do we cross that chasm, right? So if you have some thoughts there.
So this is something that I advise, right? I advise some, interestingly, I'm also an advisor to some incubators here. So we keep getting, so there is this thing called Boot Up Ventures that I sort of advise, right? They keep getting startups, a lot of times cybersecurity startups from various countries, Israel, Turkey, Romania and others that come here, and we advise them. And their take is all the same, right? Exactly similar to what you're saying. Hey, I already have my idea, and I'm working with the dark web, taking out data from there, doing vulnerability, whatever else, right? Some idea there, and we are able to do X, Y, Z, and we are able to do amazing things by able to crawl this dark web without noticing, and they cannot block us and whatever else. That's the technology we've created. But I want to come to US, and I'm only in Turkey, and that's the question that I asked them, right? Is the market? Do you think you've captured enough of the market? So it's like this, right? As a startup, you cannot be saying, okay, I'm also going to sell in India versus also sell in US, also sell in here, and also sell in there. It's too broad. You don't have the money, you don't have the resources, you don't have the time to do everything. And there are going to be tweaks and turns that you have to do for each market. If you think the market that you've gone after, right, which is India, is big enough, is two customers enough to validate? Is two kind of customers enough, or are there other hundreds of customers like that may also be there? Why are you not able to go to them? That would be my counter question. Can you go to those other 100 customers that are still there? Because my take is not the same selling. I'll tell you, lots of big companies, at least in the US, they will not sell outside the US till maybe even years down the line. Maybe after 100 customers, they start selling, to companies outside. Because the whole thing is, once you get into a new jurisdiction, it's not just about the technology, it's about so many other things. It's going to be how you do marketing, how you do sales, the sales people you hire, everything is going to be so different. It's not like a step here and there. So that's how I see it. So if you are getting more traction there, first get traction there, prove your traction there, right? Show it's possible, and then you can come into a new market. I don't see it like, just you have done it and I'm going to now also be in second market and third market, and I got two customers everywhere. It's not going to be a sustainable company in the longer run. That's my take on it.
No, I think that's a fantastic point, Vishwas, and Chetan, right? So there are some practical challenges of sort of starting to build from here and then getting the initial traction, doing the validation, and then also seeing that, hey, the willingness to pay, the appetite for risk in trying out startups is more in the West. And it's traditionally been there. It's probably changing, but not yet. So here, let's dial up the contrast, right? So if let's say that if any of the startups here, cybersecurity specifically,
Yeah,
if you
Rajiv, I have a question here, right? Mohit
go
here.
ahead.
So Vishwas, we are talking about market traction and a lot of good thing, right? I have a question, right? While you are mapping or while you are trying to see the traction, what approach typically you take? You take a bottom-up approach or a top-down approach, talking to CTOs, CISOs, or validating your solution at a base level and then going ahead? Because all these senior folks, right, CTOs and CISOs, they are pretty occupied in a lot of things and getting their time, and then the patience is also required in order to sell through the journey. So what is your journey and how you have basically handled this kind of scenarios?
Okay, that's a very good point, Mohit. I think from my perspective, we have to identify the buyer. It's like, and this is my learning also, right? Like I said, my biggest problem was this. I was not into the sales journey before, being a CEO. I was a CTO, but I never ever thought of the sales journey the same way, right? So my thought was, I know the CTO, it's going to be the same thing for a buyer, and, it'll all be good, right? So I went to a CTO and got things done. But what I realized, and this is my learning, right? And this is what you should see. You have to see the various personas that are involved in the product. There could be a user, there's a buyer. You have to be very clear on those things. For validation on whether somebody is going to buy it, you need to know the buyer. And in a lot of companies, the buyer might be a CISO or a cloud company, maybe a CTO or others, right? That's where the buyer is. The users may be different from the buyer, right? And the users could be somebody else. The buyer is going to look at things like, how much priority is this product for me? You actually, when you're doing validation, right, it's not about just saying, hey, do you like this product? Everybody will, they are friends. Nobody, you are putting effort and something that you're doing is of value. The question you have to ask them is not whether you like the product. The question you have to ask them is, why would you want to buy this product? Why wouldn't you buy the other product? I know it's a very hard question. Generally, it's something that you get scared about. Saying, hey, should I ask them, do you really want to buy this? You should be able to feel confident saying, what, there is this company X, Y, and Z. Do you think their product would even, have you seen their product? They try to do this. Why would you even want to buy this? You have to do the reverse validation with them, right? And then the validation that work best are where people say, what, I tried product X, Y, and Z from competitors. This doesn't work because of these problems. I want something that works in this, and this is right now the problem for me alone, or maybe 10 other companies like me, 100 other companies, but in the next 10 years or 5 years, it's going to be a problem for everybody, right? Those are the kind of companies that that you should that's how I would do validation. Those are the ways I would those are people I would talk to. So talk to the, like I said, the buyers, identify who the buyer. In certain case, maybe CISOs. In certain case, it may be just the senior managers, the directors. They identify exactly who's the buyer, who's the user. Talk to the buyer about the buying thing. Talk to the user about usage of the product, right? How does it work? What are the challenges? Would you adopt something like this if it worked like this, right? And so on. So that's how I would look at it. And to get to the people, right? My take has been this, right? And this is where I said earlier also. Look at what Jyoti Bansal said, right? He said he was an engineer before and he sort of sold what App Dynamics or whatever, right? His take was, as I remembered, again, I'm no expert at him. I think I just read it, heard his thing once, where he said, you know what? He actually reached out to people on LinkedIn. Once you had identified the buyer, the user, he sent LinkedIn requests to 100 users, 100 buyers. Only 5 responded. It was very poor reception, but those 5, he was able to iterate his idea, get something out of it, create value, and then go ahead with the changed idea, talk to another 100, and then you get only 5 more. And it's, of course, it's going to be, the hit ratio is going to be bad, like I think was mentioned by Mohit, right? The CISOs are busy, the engineers are busy, he's busy, you're not going to get the right inputs. But that's the way to do it. I think the good thing now is, right, and this is to what Rajiv spoke also, the good thing now is that we are not bound by distance as much. You can learn about the US market sitting in India as much as you could learn from here. Of course, there are going to be some differences, but you could probably get to 80% of the market, 80% of how well somebody here could do.
Yep.
So
this is a good point to ask the startups, right? Again, I'm sort of trying to push the button here, but if we know that the market is really in, let's say the valley, right, where you have all the markets, you have the funding, you have early adoption, willingness to pay, all that stuff, and if you're all these startups are obviously building from here in India, mostly in Bangalore, why wouldn't you sell it first, right, in the West? What are the biggest hurdles? I mean, I know some of the answers, but I would like to hear it from the startups, right? Have you started doing that instead of focusing on a slow adoption market, right, with all the challenges? And if you're confident about your technology that you are on the bleeding edge, as Chetan said, why not sell it first in the West, right? Sit here, build it. Yeah, go ahead, please.
A couple of things, right, Rajiv? While I was talking to one of my customer based out of Saudi, the first question they ask, why you are not selling in your own country? Don't you have, why don't you see a traction within your own country, right? So that's a tough question to answer. Why we are not tapping our own country and why we are not able to get the early adoption customers and stuff like that. So that could be one of the area probably for early startup phases.
Okay. Okay, sure. I would like to hear from others, but I think that's a very easy question. But let's go around and see what others have to say. I don't believe even here, well, maybe Chaitanya Project and others have started looking at the international markets, global ones. But anyone else like Chetan, have you started looking at? I know you've looked at Singapore and others, but what is the biggest hurdle?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for bringing it up again, Rajiv. Yeah, while we are speaking to customers in the US, it's very opportunistic. Like I said, our focus area is Asia Pacific, but again, we're opportunistic towards the US market, the biggest market out there, right? And especially when you look at what we do, we see that it's more kind of accepted in the North American market. So some of the questions that we get asked is, about the company and are you US registered and things like, oh, do you have SOC 2? Do you are on the cloud? Why don't you do it on-prem?
Exactly.
Then would you have insurance? So we get into different kinds of questions which are probably required from a business point of view, but not from a technology point of view. We feel that we are technology agnostic, so we can go and sell to anyone. So these are some of the barriers that we see. While we think that it's good to have a partner probably, and partner-based approach is good. Let's tie up with somebody out there who can take us to the US market. There is one approach, or we are looking at different approaches, but again, have not nailed down what exactly works.
So that's a good points, I think. right? I think first one was, hey, why aren't you selling in your country? And that's, I think, like Rajiv said, is an easier problem to solve, right? Hey, I want to sell to a particular market. It need not exactly to the point that I think Chetan brought up, right? It's not about, hey, why are you selling in one market? It's not that markets, like I said, right? Just because you built for the Indian market, you can't just sell it in the US market. There are going to be lots of challenges. Of course, technology works for every company, and everybody needs security. But like I said, right, you cannot say, even to get basic funding, you'll not get funding if you say, my product works everywhere and I could do anything anywhere, right? Okay, it may be true, but to make, you have to sharpen the pencil. You have to know exactly these are the two verticals that I'm going to sell to. These are the two geographies I'm going to sell to, because exactly like Chetan mentioned, once you come to North American market, the dynamics change. You need totally different set of compliance rules. You need totally different set of technologies, totally different set of things. If you're going to look at it only from a perspective of, hey, I am a technologist, I'm going to do it this way, and this is the only way to do it, that's not going to be an easy job for you. It's going to be a painful journey for you, because you're not looking at it from a cycle of a buyer. You're only looking at it from your technology, saying, hey, this is the technology. I know the buyer needs this, but I only do this. And to the second point that was brought up, right, which is also very important, right, saying, hey, can I partner? My take is, yes, partnership helps, but not in the early days. When you start off, you have to be the CEO, right? As the CEO, you or the CTO have to be involved in every sale. You have to understand your first maybe 50 customers, 20 customers, right? Very, very deeply. It cannot work through partnerships. Partnership come in once you've got the playbook, created. These are the questions you need to ask your salespeople to ask. If they say yes, no, that means yes, this is a target customer. Once you have that target, then you go and ask, these 5 questions, and this is your first meeting deck. This is what will lead you to the second meeting, where you can lead to a POC. And that will only happen once, as a founder, you've done everything. So partnerships will not help. And like I said, and I think Chetan, you brought up, right, saying the challenges are different. You cannot expect, and that's why, like I said, companies don't sell to multiple geographies at the same time. You could, sitting in India, sell to the US, and I know a lot of companies that do that. Right? You could sit in India, because, like I said, you may not know 100%, but if your technology is good, 80% of the market, you may still be able to sell here. But you cannot say, as a startup, I'm going to sell in every geography and do everything because my technology is good. It's not about technology alone. It's about so many other dynamics that come into picture that you are not even considering. So that's how I see it, Chetan.
Yep.
And I think that actually goes to the previous point too, which said, hey, I have a customer in Saudi and he's asking, why didn't you do it in India? Hey, that's the whole go-to-market question, right? I am targeting that. Those are the markets that I'm targeting. I'm not targeting an Indian market because it's not, ready to accept a product like this, which is a more sophisticated solution. That's how I see it. Rajiv, did you have anything to add? Thanks.
No,
Thanks,
I think those are valid points, right? There are definitely practical aspects to be considered. It's easy to say that we'll build here and sell it there, but then when you look at the practicalities of it, there are all the other things around the product, not just the technology, right? Be it compliance,
exactly.
be it anything else, right? And what I've heard, and I know a couple of startups based out of Bangalore that are building it only for the US market. And there, the practical challenges are that, okay, you need somebody to be there, right? Not just occasionally, maybe initially you go do some market validation in the early idea stages, talk to people and do all that. While you're building here, you can sort of travel back and forth if that becomes possible again. But then once you sort of get into, okay, yes, potential pilots, right? Things like that. So just having very two-person team, CTO, CEO kind of thing, you need somebody in that market, right? Where you're planning to sell, hoping to sell day in and day out, right? So how do you enable that, right? You can't, in the initial stages, you can't outsource it. You can't hire a sales and business guy. Obviously, the price points are much higher in the valley, and if the CEO, ideally the business guy has to be there and the CTO or whatever has to be here, building the product. And while the CEO, the business guy really validates it. And that's an ideal sort of idealistic setup if you really want to target that market, but it doesn't work for everybody, right? So there is obviously financial issues, which shouldn't be ignored. Then there is logistics. Okay, will the CEO really move there? There are visa issues. I mean, there are other aspects of maybe setting up a company and other things that that are fairly possible these days. But I think the practical challenges there are really what prevent people, and so they sort of just accept the fact that, okay, we will, wherever I am, I'm going to build for this market, and that shouldn't, day and age, it shouldn't be a limiting scenario. And that's where we want to, we as in from a H.A.C.K perspective, right? We want to figure out, okay, what are the ways to showcase the startups here? Not just showcase, because that's like a one-time show kind of a thing, wherein the startups really go there and talk about their products. But how do you enable this bootstrapping in a market where you do not exist, right? I don't know if you have some thoughts there, Vishwas.
How do you bootstrap a market that does not necessarily exist? From my perspective, like I said, right, we have to look at it. If you're looking at H.A.C.K, right, security, like I said, is an adjacent domain to a lot of other enterprise markets, right? See how are there people, firstly, the first thing is, are there people that are selling in adjacent domains in enterprise companies in India and actually doing well? If there are none, then you have a bigger problem. If there are, see what they did. From my perspective, the easiest way to sort of get something going is by just starting off with following the steps that have already been taken. If there are monitoring companies that are there in India that have done well, if there are maybe which are closer, right? There are the infrastructure companies in India that have done well. Right? That's the way to go. If I see that in CRM space, right, one company comes up, then two come up, then three come up, and now we have a lot of CRM companies, right, which are also enterprise companies, by the way, right? They've gotten it. Yeah. So figure out which are the closest companies in this space. How have they been successful? You have to do sort of a lot of market validation, figuring out what did they do right, what did they do wrong, and that's how you'll have to sort of at least that could be a starting point, and then you can say, okay, what, security market differs in these aspects, which means we have to do these other things differently, and then take it from there. And that's how I would say it. And my take is this: moving forward, I think from H.A.C.K perspective, I feel the world is headed to a more fragmented world, right? I saw recently there was somebody who said, I saw some post by somebody from IAB, Internet Architecture Board, who which I sort of follow. It said, US is saying, I'm not going to be peering my networks with China anymore, and not let them, which means they have to go through third parties and so on. And so internet is getting more fragmented as we move forward. I'm assuming similar things are going to happen across the world. And my take is there's going to be a considerably bigger opportunity in cybersecurity moving forward, which is secure. A lot of the defense budgets that we have are also going to move into cybersecurity, because it's not just about physical defense anymore. It's also going to be a lot of cyber defense. So a lot of defense budgets will also move. You see, China has done that already. So my take is this thing is going to grow from here. What you have to do as a company is make sure, if you're especially doing for things in India, how do you sort of sustain and move forward? Actually, now that you talk about companies doing things in India, right? Now it reminds me, there was a company, I forget the name, they're SD-WAN company. I met their founders when they were just starting off. And I forget, they are doing pretty well. They have like 100 customers and they're doing SD-WAN. It's exactly the same problem, right? Saying SD-WAN, there are lots of companies, it's a new technology. They are doing things here in India, and they're targeting companies like ICICI Bank and this and that, and they've actually been fairly successful. So I don't forget the name of the company, but yeah, actually, yeah. So I actually know them. I met them. I can actually connect you to those guys if you want, right? But in a adjacent field, who've done pretty well, and I think they keep getting awards every few days because I'm connected to them on LinkedIn. I see they have. And they are out of Bangalore itself. They are guys out of Juniper, and I think Juniper itself. Yes. So they've done fairly well. Yeah. So there are examples.
Right. So I think the two biggest things, right? Brought out two critical points. So looking at what has worked for India, right, and how things are shaping up for the future. So what has really worked? Obviously, India is known for the Wipros and the Infosys of the world, right? Things that have originated in India, the huge services industry and cybersecurity. If you look at it in terms of businesses, it's mostly through these channels, right? Where you have the SIs and the OEMs and sort of the cybersecurity players come together. So that is something. I don't know if any of the startups here have started engaging, but that is something that is already something we are thinking about. Okay, how do we facilitate that in terms of partnering with an Infosys and other things? Yes, there are challenges, like you mentioned, early stages. You want to really talk to your end user and your the guy who signs the check to know the pain points. Going through the partner brings about this level of indirection where you're disconnected. So that is one. The essentially partnering with the services industry. And the second point that you brought up, right, in terms of fragmenting. So that is another thing. Cybersecurity going forward, we do see that from even broadly from a technology perspective, the countries, right, at that level, people want to be self-reliant, right? And this huge thing in India about being self-reliant, Atmanirbhar. I think the Prime Minister spoke about it even yesterday from a cybersecurity perspective. I don't know details, but that I think is something I would like to know from the startups, right? I mean, there are obviously challenges in terms of visibility and transparency as to how can they engage with some of these different sector contracts and other things. But have any of the startups here, have you made any headway on that? Any questions on that? Any learnings that you can share?
From the startup side? Yeah, go ahead, Chetan.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes, I think from the Atmanirbhar perspective and everything, there was a cybersecurity grand challenge, right, announced by India and METI and so on. So a couple of us have taken part, and two companies here have actually gone into the first round as well. So we are working towards that and to see how we can overall support, because if you see from their point of view, India is one of the highest attack countries, and they're trying to see how to shore up the defenses in India and how they can work with startups to help that cause. So that is one that is going on. Apart from that, there is a PMA, as they call it, preferential market access policy, which has come up by the government, where they have to look inwards first and then see if there are any products out here, use that first, and then only go to the outside market if it's not available. So as part of that, there's another big initiative called as GEM, which is going on, which is the government e-tendering or the government marketplace for all products. That is something that we are trying to get onto. But that has got its own challenges. They've just initiated it, launched it, and so on. There's a lot of hurdles to get onto that platform itself. But these are some of the steps that we are looking at. It's only at the central government level, but it's not come down to the state government level. So there's no PMA for the state government. It's only for the central government so far.
Got it. That's pretty good information, I think, and good research looks like.
Yeah. And also the big initiative that is happening, right? So India is looking at 5 trillion GDP, right? Out of that, they're talking about 1 trillion plus coming only from the digital services. And if that is the case, then they have to protect it. It's not just about growing. So as part of that, they're looking at how startups can help this overall cause. So there's a lot of movement happening, but we need to see how to fit into that overall picture.
I totally agree. I think, yes, from my perspective, the way I look at cyber budgets in India are going to grow considerably. I think the world is getting considerably more fragmented, and yes, there is an opportunity for sure for all the startups, and I think it's only going to grow. And you guys are lucky; you are in the right place, I think, in the right time. The only thing is, you have to sort of have some patience, get some sort of some some staying power, and also be able to get some customers. So interestingly, while you're talking, I just looked at the name of the company. The name of the company is Level Networks, I think, LAVE Networks. And I know their founders. If you want, Shamal and I think Karthik, I can actually connect you there. They have, like, I see, they keep talking about, at least I see they keep getting award. They are part of ICICI and this bank and that bank. It's a similar problem I see, right? There are companies in the US that are doing things. There are technologies that are new, and companies in India do not adopt new solutions, and they've been able to actually get a lot of those customers. So you may be wanting to talk to some of them. If you want, Rajiv, they could be also good speakers for you, because although they're not in the cybersecurity field, but because it's an adjacent field like SD-WAN, where if you're seeing SD-WAN and SASE, right, that's sort of converging. So a lot of security in the network, and so web gateway and CASB converging with things like the SD-WAN to create the SASE market. I think this could be a good area of course, collaboration, but also a good area of learning for the teams. And if you want, I can connect you, Rajiv, there.
Cool. Yeah. Let's connect about that. Thanks.
So I think
A quick time check, Vishwas. It's we have about 30 more minutes left.
okay.
I think we have already covered a lot of stuff. So go ahead.
So let me just get through this thing, right? The team. So some of the questions that were asked of me, right? Hey, what are some of the biggest things that you did? And I think you did mention teams, right? One of the things that I saw with teams, right? And first time I sort of took up, the work. I think, like I said, I started my first company. It's now two companies, right? Ionis and LiveReach Media. The problem that I had was, I'll tell you this, right? The biggest problem that I had, and my learning from that was, start companies with people who have the same level of motivation and desire. So what happened in my first company that I started, I took money on day one, like I said, right? So just left my company, and on day one I was getting a salary and everything was good, and life was good, and we had a lot of people. We had like 30-40 people in India in the first 1 year. I don't know where it reached, but yeah, that's where we were. And we bought a company also in the first year itself, right? But the problem that I had was, because we hired very, very senior people, all senior vice presidents and vice presidents from large companies, I realized close to nobody came to office. They were, the senior management, right? Everybody would come to. We would have meetings from like 9 to 11 at night, in US time, to actually talk about the status. The reason was these guys had already done 2 or 3 startups, made so much money. They were on the boards of these big companies that they did not even. So that was my first learning in the first company, and that was one of the reasons I left. The company is still going on. It's called LiveReach Media. Like I said, it's still in Bangalore. It's in, but that was my learning from that. Saying, you know what, they have to have the same level of hunger. These guys are like, they are reaching the 60s. They are in a level where they want to sort of relax and take it more easy. And I'm at a level where I want to really get things going. There's a mismatch. Again, I'm not blaming anybody, but there's a clear mismatch. What I want and what these guys want is totally different. They have different aspirations. They're looking at something totally different, and that's not what I want to do, right? And so that's where I sort of that was my learning. The second learning that I got from this experience was, what, especially with founders, you need to have people who are going to, of course, it's about how good they are and how they complement your skills, and all that is good. But the biggest thing is not all that. The biggest thing I feel is about whether they have sustenance power, especially as you guys are talking about not taking VC funding, and in India you have to sustain yourself. Do these people have sustenance power? It's going to be a big challenge for you if you have a team, but you don't have the people who can sustain themselves after some time. Who they might come to you saying, hey, I need a salary hike. My salary outside would be X, and you're only giving me X by 2. Yes, there's an opportunity, but there's no guarantee, and so I don't want to do this, right? That's going to be a very common thing, and it's a normal human tendency, right? You are continuously looking outside and saying, what, I could have been a director in Amazon, and here I am in a startup getting like paid pennies on the dollar, and working day and night, and there's no end to sight. So I think that's one of the things that I learned from them, right? You need teams that, of course, believe in each other, that are that in a lot of cases know each other. I think that's very critical. But it's also about people who are willing to stake it out and last the longer run. From my perspective, you need a balance between very senior people and junior people. You do not need many senior people, but you do need some senior people if you are the CEO. If you are the CEO, you cannot be guiding engineers yourself, because if you're going to do that, the other things are going to suffer. If somebody else can do your job, you should hire that person. You should be doing the higher level job, right? And that's what I feel. If you're doing something just as coding and getting those things, then you're not doing a CEO's job well. You have to be at a level where you are sort of looking at the broader picture, and somebody else can take care of the smaller level things. And so from my perspective, yes, you need a few senior people, and then you need those people who are passionate. You cannot have the middle management which is very senior, because middle management, senior meaning they are from these big companies. They're going to say, oh, you know what, I'm from this large company, and I work only 9 to 5, and I only work on Monday to Thursday, and every few weeks I need a few holidays because my kids are going out and this and that. That's not going to work in startup, because you as founders have so much passion. You want to get so much done, and you have people who are not as passionate, and that's normal, right? So the people who will be passionate as you, as probably these freshers who are getting an opportunity, if you show them a path, say, you know what, if you do this, this leads to a totally different path for you in your life. and they are motivated enough, I think they will put in effort. And that's what I see in my company too. We did hire a few senior people, but the people who've done the best have been the people who've been more junior. But we do need a few senior people, just a few, to sort of guide these junior people and make sure things are aligned. We have the basic structures and and guidance for those people. And you as CEOs or CTOs are not involved in day-to-day affairs of just of code and so on. So that's how I see it. The other thing that I see with the team is, right, of course you need diverse team, but the other thing that I see with startups is you cannot hire for the future, right? Hey, 2 years later I'm going to need a salesperson, so I'm going to hire, or I will need a manager. You only hire, or I need a UI person now because I'll need a UI in 2 months. You cannot hire for the future. You have to hire a need that is critical right now. This is what I need right now, and I need somebody who can help me solve this issue immediately. That's what you need to hire for. You cannot hire for the future saying, okay, I need something for the future, so I'll be doing hiring now. Those things I don't think you should be thinking of as a startup. That's on a team perspective. Any question there? I know I want to rush a bit faster from here. And I'm assuming there are no questions, and I'm going to move forward. Right? So on the startup, right, the one of the key challenges that I had, right, in the start was documentation. I think one of the key things that I see a lot of startup founders do not do very well is three people get together with an idea and say, okay, I'm all good, and then what ends up happening after a few months, years, some of the people leave and another set of people come in. And challenges that I've seen, these are with Indian companies in India too, because I've sort of helped some of them, right, is and they're not into cybersecurity, some of them into financials, right, lending and so on, has been that they start the company, one business founder and one founder, technical founder here, or business founder there, technical founder there, and the problem has been the person leaves after 9 months and they haven't signed all the documents, and now their code is in your IP, and now you cannot claim IP, and you're going to be uh, screwed. So one of the key things that at least my learning has been, right, and this happened to me when we were going for acquisition, right, once. So for me, because I had done this before, I had the documents ready, I had people sign it. But the thing that I did not do well was I did not look at every signature in every document, right? In some document there are 10 signatures required. I just saw, okay, it's been done, okay, kept it. When the due diligence thing was happening, right, with various companies that were doing due diligence with our document, they said, hey, what? So many employees have not signed these places here and there and everywhere. And when I went back to these guys saying, you know what, I need a signature from you to please, because I'm going through this acquisition, people took the advantage and said, you know what, now you're doing acquisition, now tell me how you can grow my equity. You told me earlier that you would think about it. Hey, you guys who had left the company 10 years back, or 3 years back, or 2 years back, or 1 year back, they're now telling me, hey, you know what, give me more equity, because now they realize this. So one of the greatest learning for me, especially at the exit, was, hey, you know what, all the documentation has to be clean. In fact, I would say, if the documentation is clean, you have a lot of things to help you with the valuation. But if the documentations are not clean, you are, that is one of the bigger factors that can actually lead to problems in the due diligence phase. From my perspective, keep documentation clean. You should have clear sets of agreements saying, what happens if we three start off and one leaves, two start off and one leaves, whatever else, right? A condition that may happen. How does the equity get divided? How much equity comes through? Everything should be very clearly documented, and that's one thing that I feel is very important and has to be done. Any questions there? Okay, I think somebody asked me about the team earlier and so on. And how to that. Okay, let's go to the execution, right? Like I said, execution is sort of the hardest thing. It's not about the technology, right? There are lots. So, and this is to this earlier point, right? There are lots of things that are interesting and lot of things that are important. We have to look at what is important. It's because there are thousands of things you could do anytime, right? Which are interesting. It's not about interesting, it's about important. And I see, especially when you come from engineering perspective, people look at, hey, this is the new technology and this is what I want to work on, or this is what I think is going to be useful. You have to see what is important to a customer, what is going to be important or critical to a customer. If you're going to sell something that people are not going to buy for the next 3 years, and it's not going to be a priority for them, the top 5 priority in the next 2-3 years, that's not worth it. don't go ahead with it, right? That's not going to, you're not going to make it be successful there. So that's what I say. The second thing I would say is you have to relentless focus on value, right? If you are sort of focus, this is my value is my UI as an example. Then you're going to have to try to get, how do I get the best designers, right? How do I get the right feedback from the right people, right? How do I use the best frameworks from UI if the value is the UI or the workflows? If your value is some technology in the back end, you have to make sure you are sort of focusing on related focus on that part. It's very easy to have this sprawl of face. Customer is asking X and Y and Z. Can I also do it? You have to sort of be very focused and very meticulous in what you add in functionality. In fact, I would say I take a rule which says, what? I'm going to add one function. I'm going to remove something else as a result. And if not, I'm going to justify why that is not possible and why this is critical. So doing something, taking up a totally new functionality, you have to make sure you're very clearly understand the implications of that, and focusing, like I said, doing the validation, doing the market, which market to sell in, which verticals to sell to. Everything has to be very, very, very sharpened, right? It has to be very sharpened. Like people feel, and especially engineers, right? We feel our technology is applicable everywhere, but think of it, right? To sell to a retail person would be very different to sell to a SaaS company, right? The kind of salespeople, if I was to sell to a SaaS company, I'm going to get salespeople from companies that sell to SaaS companies, right? So if I was to sell software to SaaS company, my security software, I would sort of look at who is selling to who and who's selling to other SaaS companies out there. If my focus is enterprise, financial companies, I'm going to look at those kinds of salespeople, right? Who's selling things to ICICI Bank. So if my focus is these financial companies, I'm going to also see what magazines they use, what are the events that they go to. So I'm going to market accordingly. So everything will depend not. So you have to, and this is one thing I feel I cannot emphasize enough. You have to, as a team, narrow focus. Well, the vision has to be very broad. The focus has to be very narrow of what you're trying to execute. And you have to try fast and fail. Try fast and fail fast. Right? Fail fast, try hard. Of course, that's what you need to do. And yeah, that's what I would sort of say on the execution side. Any questions there? Yeah, go ahead.
Just waiting for the questions. I mean, I would doubly emphasize that. I see this a lot with pretty much every startup that I've talked to. Is the focus, is rather the lack of focus, right? And this is very easy, or this is very hard to sort of stick to, but very easy to fall into a trap, especially in cybersecurity, because if you say that I'm doing only X, and then you go to validate, they'll say, oh, X is interesting, but why not also, I would also like Y and Z. Then it's very tempting to add those, right? And very soon you spread so thin that it's very hard to say, okay, are you doing this? I mean, where do you fit in, let's say, the Gardner bucket, right? They're very broad buckets, but then you don't have that one unique niche thing where you're the only company in the world that provides that service.
Right? So from my perspective, yes, exactly. Absolutely, Rajiv. Yes. I think we have to do that, because think of it, right? Big companies are not able to scale with thousands of resources. Startups, you're going to do too broad. No way you're going to scale or be able to do everything. You have to narrow the focus. As engineers, we always feel we could do this and that, but that's why you need this complementary skills. You need the business founder, or you need the a selling founder who understands the product, who understands the need for focus, who understands what is priority, who is asking the right question from customer. When customer says, X is important, but if you get Y, then you have to ask the question, hey, what if I only give you Y? Do you really need X? Can you buy something just with Y, right? And is Y and you have to see, if people could say, yes, you give me, you give vulnerability scanning with, config audit, with runtime, with this, with that, exploit prevention, then I'll buy it. But that's, even big companies are not able to do that. That's not actually a startup. It's multiple big companies mergers, right? That's what you're talking about. From my perspective, if you have to do startups, you have to have very narrow focus, very small problem statement, very narrow problem statement, very narrow customer focus, very narrow, marketing focus, market focus, geography focus. It has to be very, very sharp. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Perfect. I think I can go into more things, but let me just say, right, the exit, right? From my perspective, yes, people look at exit as, either a buyoff from a company and so on, but exits can be in different ways, right? You could look at buyoff from companies, you could look at mergers, you could look at, I see a lot of companies. I think I was seeing one company recently out of India. Actually, I talked with that name. They recently, the guy was an SVP from FireEye, and this guy is from McAfee, the CTO. And we talked to them. They were doing something on endpoint security and EDR. I know they got bought recently by a company in Netherlands. They were also like 5 to 10 people, but they got bought by a company in Netherlands, right? But the basic thing, I forget his name. The guy's name is Abra, but I don't remember the name of the company. But yeah, so the exits come in various ways. From my perspective, what we need to do is, we have to be clear of what we plan to have the exit. From my perspective, if I was to look at it, always be in the thought of exit, right? When I actually went ahead and actually got an exit, it didn't happen in day one. I got offers, I'll say, right from the beginning. Once we have ideas and we went to big companies and big companies validated the thing, they gave us things, right, saying, hey, you can buy your product. Instead of buying a product, why don't you buy the company and you can build this product in this, hey, we are a big SaaS company. You can just build this product internally because this is a normal thing that works for all SaaS, and we can buy a company, right? That's how I saw it. I didn't buy it, I didn't sell then, but everything that worked out was based on that. So from my perspective, and this was this feedback that I gave this company, like I said, it's in the marketing sales side of thing, but I gave them the same feedback, right? And they're about to raise a series in the next 2-3 weeks, and they got this offer from somebody. I told them, hey, you know what? Always try to sell it. It's like, okay, if this guy gives you $1 billion, are you ready to sell? Yes. If so, then what is the value? What is your sort of breaking point? And the key thing you have to look at, right, when you're trying to sell is when do people buy your company, right? It has to align with their go-to-market. It doesn't matter how good your product is, right? If they have to get a different set of salespeople, they're not going to buy the thing. Or if they need even the same company, right? If I have to sell, the people you sell vulnerability management product to is different from people who will sell config audit to be different from the people who buy compliance would be different from. You have to understand your buyers, and it has, if the buyer is the same. So if McAfee's endpoint security and my product sells very easily with endpoint security and I have value, they would be ready to buy you, right? Because hey, this complements thing, you have some value. Even if you don't have too many customers, I would be ready to buy you. If this means I have to get another set of salespeople and this doesn't actually, my buyer is not going to buy this, is going to be some other buyer who's going to buy it. I need another seller for this, that's not going to cut it. So you have to understand the sales process. You have to understand who the buyer is, which entity in the buyer is going to buy it, and whether the same entity is there. So if you have a vulnerability management company and you're creating something for the vulnerability marketplace, yes, you'll be able to sell it there. But if you try to sell it to somebody who's not doing vulnerability, it's not going to be as useful there, right? And so your valuation will matter, but also in that certain cases you may not get an exit if you do it. So you have to be talking to these companies, understanding their strategy, but also looking at, hey, this is the market, this is the product, and these are the buyers, these are the sellers, and this is how they can expand their market. And that's how companies look at it, right? So this guy asked me, right, how do I look at valuation? So I told him it's not about valuation, not about your product alone, right? Look at it from their perspective. In this case, he was saying, they told him they would double their ARR from 100 to 200 million. So I said, okay, then if you're going to double the ARR from 100 to 200 million, your valuation can be based on the fact that in the next 5 years you're going to be getting them $100 million per year extra, which you have to look at. Okay, there is going to be a risk, of course, right? That is there for the company, but assume they feel that way, that their current sellers can sell to their current customers the same product. Keep your valuation accordingly, right? And you'd be able to negotiate accordingly. It's not about what you think your value is or what your technology does and so on. That's how they will value you. They will value you how much they can make out of it, and that's how it's going to look. That's how they're going to look at. So that's sort of from the exit perspective. And the key thing I think I will say is, right, while we sort of talk of exits as the sort of just the celebration of getting one of these big acquisitions and so on, or being in the news. My take is, in a lot of cases, the exit, you may not get the exit, but and that's been my case in my previous company too. The learning in each step is immense. If you're going to look at just from the exit perspective, you may not be happy and successful. But if you look at it from perspective of the learning, the growth that you've had, you're going to be a lot more happy. So from my perspective, you should celebrate progress, not just from that exit perspective, but look at it from a perspective of progress, no matter how big or small. And I think that's sort of critical from a thought process perspective. Any question there? And I think I can sort of wrap up. And I think I know I don't know what time it is, but I know we are probably at the end of time, or close to the end of time. Yeah, I see it 10:19. Any questions, guys? I see a lot of other people, right, who have not asked questions. I see Nitish, and I see Prakash, and Pawan, and I know Nanda asked questions. I see. Any questions from you guys?
Hey, Vishwas, question again. I'll just
Yeah,
ask
go
the
ahead.
last question probably.
Mhm.
So did you go after potential acquirers, or did they reach you, or how did the whole process happen?
Yeah, so I think it was see, I was open to acquirers all along. Okay, so let me say it this way: I was not talking. So from my learning, acquisition doesn't happen if you're trying to go when the time is ripe and you go, hey, buy me. It's not going to happen. You should have had a relationship with them. They should have known your product. So on. So I went both ways, right? So I reached out to people, and people reached out to me earlier. But the ones that moved the most were where where people had already talked to me in the past, right? People who had seen my journey last 1, 2, 3 years, right? Those are the people who actually were willing to move forward. Those are the people who are ready to risk it. Because in a way, right, it's also a risk. You're going to go into a company that there's so many factors that come into picture. So that's how it is. So the ones that have worked best is people who have had relationships for 1, 2, 3 years. Now, when you talk to these people 3 years back, you're not talking of it from an acquisition perspective, talking of it from a perspective of, hey, getting feedback, or seeing how we can complement your product. Although if, from a longer term perspective may not make from a shorter term perspective may not make sense, but if you see, hey, Palo Alto Networks or McAfee is a potential buyer, you reach out to them, right? At least you'll know the hierarchy in the company. You'll reach out, you'll know, okay, who's the corporate head of corporate development, which is the team that buys it, or who's the which organization would I be part of. And while as part of that first discussion, you can also ask them their strategies. It's not a one-way street, right? When there's an acquisition, it's a two-way street. It's not that they're buying them, it's also how your growth is going to be when you join that company. So you should be able to ask them questions, saying, okay, what is your strategy going to be? Why do you think this way? And once you get that idea, when you actually have to go ahead and do that acquisition thing, it's going to be a lot easier, because you already know the right people. You already talked to them 3 times, 2 times, right? So don't wait for last moments to sort of look at the acquisition. What I've seen is all those last minute sort of introductions, or meetings that we had, they do not pan out, because it's very hard, right? People have to do due diligence in a matter of weeks. It's not possible. People who've talked to you for months together, it's a lot easier. And then there are lots of other things that I can tell you about acquisitions, right? I've had infinite learning in that space too. It's like, I think you can, going through a few acquisitions, you can actually write a book on it. But that's for another time. I think you guys are still in a slightly earlier stage. But if you need any help on those sides of things, anything else, you can always reach out to me. I'm sort of more than willing to help, you guys out in any which way I can. I need nothing from you. No equity, nothing. You guys can hold all the equity. I've been helped by a lot of people, and I'm willing to help. Go out of my way to help whoever needs help. So that's from me.
That's great.
But yeah, that's where I look at it.
That's great to know, Vishwas. So on that topic, right? So for the startups here, what's the right way for them to, let's say, get in touch with McAfee? Right? If they want to engage in not from an acquisition perspective, but even from potential partnerships perspectives, or anything else, any other opportunities where McAfee actually engages with startups.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have lots of forums, right? So the way we do it is 2 ways. Companies approach us, right? Lots of cases through VCs, because VCs have invested, or lots of cases companies approach me because I was also part something called IT startups, right? So I was, we were the first company in that IT startup that got sort of acquired, right? So people reach out through all sorts of different forums. I would, if it's McAfee, I can connect you guys. If it's a relevant product, I will connect you to the right team. I have no issues. But the way, if we were to look at it more generally, right? If you are a vulnerability management startup, the companies would be Rapid7, the companies would be Qualys, and so on. So reach out to those guys. In fact, I see, reach out either directly or through your advisors and others, because that's how you should have advisors. A lot of advisors have a lot of contacts. Get those advisors connected to those companies. Get yourself at least known in those companies. Get sort of their discussions going. I think that's how things would be. And in a lot of cases, what I've seen is, especially for me, the first early contacts in a lot of cases came from advisors that had taken, who were very senior people who had worked with, right, who were my managers. Like in HP, I had a guy, Sar. He was a CEO before of HP Cloud. He became the CEO of a company, Teridian, and just, I think recently he left that. He's on the board of Xilinx and so on. Right? So these guys know a lot of people, so they help me, connect, and that's how I would do it, right? But then, there's also friend of friend of friend, right? So somebody I worked with said, hey, you know what, you need help, I will connect you to person X, who's my brother's brother, or I studied with him in school, but he's in, now the CEO of this, or CEO of this, and people connect. But you can't expect it last moment, but yeah, you could do that. So a more generic way would be go through advisors, and the typical channel, just like you search for customers on LinkedIn, you could search for these partners on LinkedIn. For McAfee specifically, you can always reach out to me. For others, companies that I also know, which I know a lot in the Valley, I can also connect you to senior management if it's so required. I know a lot of this senior management from a lot of the big companies.
Sounds great. So actually, on the part, we have a few more minutes left. Are there any final questions? I want to talk about advisors, the startups here have any advisors, because that is a topic by itself, right? How do you find the right advisors for your startups? Engage with them, equity sharing,
Exactly.
all those aspects. Is it informal, things like that?
So from my
So
learning with advisors has been. Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. There's a bit of. I want to the startups to see if they have any final questions for you that maybe they can directly connect with you later. I know you're open to it, and you're probably going to share your email. Any other things? Any other questions? Chetan and Prakash had a couple, and any of the others, Nanda, Mukesh, Chaitanya. Who else is there? Nitish,
Mohit,
even the floor.
Prakash.
In case you have any other questions or concerns.
So Rajiv, I can answer your question, right? And my learning on this advisors. My learning on my advisors was, I gave too much equity to advisors in the beginning. I thought advisors are very good for a very short duration. So if I was to take advisors, I would take them with a particular set of thoughts in mind. Right? Saying, hey, I need you as an advisor, but I'm going to take you for 1 year. Because my take is, advisors are not very long term. They're not very useful. Most of them are not useful, right? So in the beginning, you may feel, hey, you need this thing, but after 1 year, you don't care, right? So advisors, be very careful. You have a very tight agreement with them. Have an agreement on what your expectations are. Saying, what, I expect probably around an hour a week, or hour 2 weeks, hour in a month, whatever else, right? Is what I'm expecting. And if you could help me connect to customers and so on, or partners, have very clear expectation, and don't keep very long-term agreements with advisors, because as you go through the stages, the kind of advisors that you need at each stage are totally different. So that's how I see
it. Cool. So I know. Indians.
So Rajiv, your voice was breaking. I'm not sure whether it was for me alone or everybody else.
Yeah, it's breaking for me too.
Is it sorry, is it better now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. No, all I was I think we can wrap up. There are no other questions or Vishwas, any other final points?
No,
Encouragement and practical advice.
I don't know. I think you guys, I think I'm like I said, I'm amazed you guys are actually going through this journey, especially out of India. I know it's very hard. I'm sort of in awe of all you guys. I think it takes a lot to actually even get through the journey. So you've actually taken a big step, and you're much ahead of most of the others who've all been talking but just staying there. There are thousands of people who are saying, "Hey, I have idea X and Y and Z," but you're the guys who actually taken that step forward and actually going ahead and doing this. So amazing job, guys. I think what you're doing is great. The thing that I would say is, it's not just about your hard work, your passion, and so on. It's also a lot of luck. So I wish you a lot of luck. Of course, I'm sure you're going to do everything else. So wish you a lot of luck, and hopefully, I hear of more of you as successful startups. Hear of you in the news and so on. And, I'm looking forward to tracking all the startups out of H.A.C.K, Karnataka.
Fantastic. So, what's the best way for the startups to reach out? Is it your
Yeah, my Gmail address is my first name dot second name at gmail.com. So it's vishwas.manral, manral at gmail.com. And that's the best way. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn, and my email address is there. You can connect me there, and we can take it from there.
So, thank you for taking the time. And I know it's late, like 10:30, 11ish in the Bay Area. So, thank you
That's
for
great.
joining and for sharing. And look forward to engagement and site would obviously from our perspective we would love to engage with people like you who've been in this space and who have had a lot of learnings. So we'll look forward to that, and we'll hope to see some of the startups reach out to you and see if they can engage with you personally in any capacity and make inroads into some discussion, which is one of the leaders in this space. So with that, thank you, Vishwas.
Okay, thank you so much, everybody, and thanks for staying up on, like I said, on a Sunday morning. Thank you.
All right, great. So we'll stop the recording here. Thanks everyone for joining again. You in a couple
Thank
of
you.
days.
Yep. Thanks for organizing, and thanks, Vishwas.